Micah yells at him because he's like showing himself, and yeah, there's all kinds of problems here with what's happening. And now we have all kinds of problems with David, with his family. And this is not a pretty picture this week. Things are not going well now. And yeah, his kids are going to get in trouble. And we're not going to sugarcoat it, so we'll look at what we've got. But there are several different graphics about the house of David. And Jesse was the father, and here's David and the other children who are there. And then we have David and his children, and we have Amnon, Absalom, Tamar, Adonijah, Solomon, Nathan, and 13 more. Now, we know that in between Amnon and Absalom, there was another child, but apparently that child died somewhere along the line because you just don't hear anymore about that one. But we know there's another one, but not there because it doesn't fall into the line of succession. So you need to keep that in mind that's a background thing that's going on all along the way, because the kingdom is going to go to firstborn, right? And then if that person's not there, then we go to number 2 and we go down the line. And if you don't remember that from anything else you do from like British royalty and how messy that was. And they had very good role models previously to look out for them. When we go lower, we have Solomon, and he has a child. Some of these had children, some didn't, and we will go into what we've got here. But from the line of Nathan and the line of Rehoboam, that's Solomon, eventually Jesus comes into the picture. So you can like trace that back through the genealogies that are in the New Testament. If you're really into genealogy, you want to do that. We're not going to do that today. Not. Okay, so where is all this happening? Okay, so pretty much they're hanging out in Jerusalem for a while, but now they're on a move because there are some things that are going to be happening. So some of them, they're going to be going up, they're going to be going north over towards the Dead Sea, along the Jordan River. They're going to like bump across the Jordan for a little bit to the east. They're going to come back across the Jordan again, back to Jerusalem, but they're hanging out more in this area right now than they were down here. And we're talking about David, and we're talking about his son, and we're talking about some of the other things that are going on. So let's get into the story. We've got prophecy fulfilled and learned behaviors. What was the prophecy that Nathan gave to David? Not going to die, but a lot of hardship. Yeah. So lots of hardship, and lots of hardship with the family, right? Do you remember the thing about the sword? The sword won't leave your household, and you slept with somebody like in the shadows, but your wives are going to be raped in front of people in the sunlight, right in front of everybody. Coming up. Now you're excited, aren't you? What a motivation. So we are looking at 2 Samuel chapter 13, just verses 21 and 22. Is where we're going to start. But just in case you didn't know what was going on, if you didn't have time to read up until now, let me tell you what's happening. Amnon and Tamar, they're brother and sister, but with a different mom. So half brother, half sister. And Amnon is totally infatuated with Tamar. And he wants her. And one of his helpers says, well, like just pretend to be sick. Let your dad come. And when he comes, say, hey, if my sister cooks for me, it will make me feel so much better. And your dad's not going to deny that. He'll send her, and he does, and she does, and Amnon sends everybody out, and except Tamar, and he says, "You come to bed with me," and she's like, "No, don't. Like, if you want me, just ask that, and it'll be okay." That's probably not right either, but like she's doing whatever she can to protect herself. Maybe it is okay, but if you look back in like all the previous laws, even that's not right. Like it's half brother, half sister, that's just not good. But he rapes her. And then not only does he rape her, but then he doesn't care about her anymore and he sends her away. Well, she's not a virgin anymore. Now she has to leave. If he had kept her there, it would have been bad, but it wouldn't have been this bad. He sends her away. And she goes out, robe torn, ashes all over, and she is not hiding this. She is going out wailing, screaming, "Look what he did to me." She has a brother, Absalom. He gets her. It's like, "Come to my house. I'll take care of you." He did. She was there, never married. That's what was going on. David found out about this. Now we're looking at verses 21 and 22. Mariana, would you want to read that for us?
Yeah. When King David heard of all these things, he became very angry, but he would not punish his son Amnon because he loved him, for he was his firstborn. But Absalom spoke to Amnon neither good nor bad. But Absalom hated Amnon because he had raped his sister Tamar.
David did nothing. What do you think about that?
It happens all too often. It still happens, especially with incest. I think sometimes if it's, a rape outside of the family, sometimes people will press charges, but if it's someone who's known, you don't always press charges. In fact, sometimes you do nothing, you just don't talk about it, or you pretend that it's not there.
It appears from what we read, David didn't even go to Amnon and counsel him separately. He just left it all be. It obviously this isn't right. What do you think he should have done? Don't look down. I know that look. Yeah, it's not in the Bible in front of you, so don't ignore me. Eye contact.
Which should he have done?
Yeah.
David talked with his son, at least discuss it, or and he was very unhappy with his actions, but he didn't punish him. I mean, what punishment can you do besides kill him in that day?
What about Tamar? Should he have spoken with her?
Perhaps would have said she was raped, so it wasn't consensual. And that was not her fault.
But it appears that he didn't even go to her and say, "Oh, honey."
So what are you saying? That David didn't talk to either of them?
Right.
And he should have.
Nor did he talk to Absalom. Be like, "Oh, thank you so much for taking her into your house and then taking care." That there is nothing here coming from him. We saw that before. Do you remember with Joab, when Joab kills somebody on the battlefield that he wasn't supposed to kill, and David just kind of like, "Oh, I can't, sorry." And we're back here again and nothing happens. Now, do we know what the consequences of this are? Anybody read?
Consequences to who?
To to his family. Let's start there. But it goes way beyond that.
To David's family.
Yeah. Susie, you read it?
Yeah,
Can you share with us what happens a little bit?
well, tell me if I'm getting it right.
Uh-huh.
Amnon eventually, well, Absalom goes after Amnon, but Amnon eventually challenges David as king. Am I right about that?
Absalom.
No,
Go ahead.
Amnon. Am I right? No?
I think it's Absalom.
Am I wrong? Okay, Absalom, sure, yes, challenges David as king, right, yeah. So, but Absalom goes eventually, this is like years later,
Yeah, it's at least 2 years later.
yeah, he goes back and, right,
Yeah. So Absalom has a party. And it's sheep shearing time. This is 2 years afterwards. In the meantime, nothing has happened. Absalom has not forgotten. He's got a sister in front of him the whole time. And sheep shearing party time. Hey, Pop, you want to come? And his dad's like, no, I got other things to do. Go party on your own. He's like, well, I'm going to invite all the other like siblings and we're going to have a good time. And David's like, go for it. Have a good time. Have fun. Amnon comes. Absalom talks to his servants, to the other people who are there, and says, when Amnon's drunk, kill him. None of them had a problem with this. They knew what had happened. This is the one who's going to succeed the king. This is the first in line. Absalom is the second in line. They know that if they do what he tells them to do, they're going to, be like following what the next king is going to want. There's all kinds of things that look very positive here to them. Is it ever right to kill? Did Amnon deserve to die?
That's debatable, but it's not right to kill.
Okay, so Amnon is killed by Absalom. And somebody goes running back to tell David. But when they get back to David, he's like, all of your sons are dead. And he's like, what? And then somebody else comes, he's like, wait, it's not all of them, it's Amnon. Now, David is really, really upset. Not quite as upset as he was before, but still, his son's dead, and he was killed by his other son. Not a good thing. Absalom knows it's not a really good time to go back to dad and say, the party didn't go so well. So he goes and hides. He goes to another city out in the wilderness. The city is related to where his mom came from. Remember, they have all different moms, right? Mm-hmm. David has many options for taking care of making kids. It's a different family than Amnon's family. Absalom goes there, asks for asylum, he hangs out. Okay. And what does David do? Cries. He does. Anything else? Take a wild guess. What has he done so far? Nothing. Right. He does pretty much nothing. All right. So a couple of years go past. David's hanging out in the palace doing his king thing. Absalom's hanging out with Grandpa. All right. I haven't heard from Dad. And so we want to move up. And we're looking at, still in chapter 13, verse 39, which is at the end.
The part of the king went out yearning for Absalom, for he was now consoled over the death of Amnon.
Right. So he's still not thrilled that Amnon's dead, but he gets it. But now he doesn't have his other son either. So now we have to take care of something somehow. And it's time for David to do something. So we're going to look through chapter 14 through verse 24. And I'm going to start that for you, but then I'm going to ask somebody else to take over. So get ready. Joab, son of Jeruiah, knew that the king's heart longed for Absalom. So Joab sent someone to Tekoa and had a wise woman brought from there. He said to her, pretend you are in mourning, dress in mourning clothes, and don't use any cosmetic lotions. Act like a woman who has spent many days grieving for the dead. Then go to the king and speak these words to him. And Joab put these words in her mouth. When the woman from Tekoa went to the king, she fell with her face to the ground to pay him honor and said, help me, O king. The king asked her, what is troubling you? She said, I am indeed a widow. My husband is dead. I, your servant, had 2 sons. They got into a fight, and each one in the field, and no one was there to separate them. One struck the other and killed him. Now the whole clan has risen up against your servant. They say, hand over the one who struck his brother down, so that we may put him to death for the life of his brother whom he killed. Then we will get rid of the heir as well. Janita, hurt your knee. They would put out the only burning coal I have left, leaving my husband neither name nor descendant on the face of the earth. The king said to the woman, go home, and I will issue an order in your behalf. The woman from Tekoa said to him, my lord the king, let the blame rest on me and my father's family, and let the king and his throne be without guilt. The king replied, if anyone says anything to you, bring him to me, and he will not bother you again. She said, then let the king invoke the Lord his God to prevent the avenger of blood from adding to the destruction, so that my son will not be destroyed. As surely as the Lord lives, he said, not one hair of your son's head will fall to the ground. Then the woman said, let your servant speak a word to my lord the king. Speak, he replied. The woman said, why have you devised a thing like this against the people of God? When the king says this, does he not convict himself? For the king has not brought back his banished son. Like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be recovered, so we must die. But God does not take away life. Instead, he devises ways so that a banished person may not remain estranged from him. And now I have come to say this thing, my lord the king, because the people have made me afraid. Your servant thought, I will speak to the king. Perhaps he will do what his servant asks. Perhaps the king will agree to deliver his servant from the hand of the man who is trying to cut off both me and my son from the inheritance God gave me. And now your servant says, may the word of the Lord, the king, bring me rest. For my lord the king is like an angel of God in discerning good and evil. May the Lord your God be with you. And the king said to the woman, do not keep from me the answer to what I'm going to ask you. Let my lord the king speak, the woman said. The king asked, isn't the hand of Job with you in all this? The woman answered, as surely as you live, my lord, No one can turn to the right or to the left from anything, my lord, the king says. Yes, it was your servant Job who instructed me to do this and who put these words into the mouth of your servant. Your servant Joab did this to change the present situation. My Lord has wisdom like that of an angel of God. He knows everything that happens in this land. The king said to Joab, very well, I will do it. Go, bring back the young man Absalom. Joab fell with his face to the ground to pay him honor. And he blessed the king. Joab said, today your servant knows that he has found favor in your eyes, my lord the king, because the king has granted his servant's request. Then Joab went to Jeshurun and brought Absalom back to Jerusalem. But the king said, he must go to his own house. He must not see my face. So Absalom went to his own house and did not see the face of the king. So, do you remember anything similar to this happening to David before? Where somebody told him a story and it wasn't like really a story? Where did that happen before? Yeah, Nathan did that with Bathsheba, right? Okay, so you'd think that somewhere along the line, David would it would click in, and it did, right? Okay, listen, lady. So Joab, he's the one who's talking through you. Yeah. And she's so good. Oh, yes, the king has the ears of an angel. He's so wonderful. And why wouldn't you be doing that? Kiss up as much as you can, because the king can kill you if he gets upset about it, right? So, I mean, he has trouble managing his own family, but apparently has no trouble managing other stuff. So yeah. All right. So Absalom comes back, but what happens? Yep. So he has to hang out at his house, but he cannot see his dad. What's that mean? Okay, what's it mean for a son and a dad, first of all?
There's a power differential. For one, there's some honor and shame going on.
And the people, okay, so now let's make it the king and his upcoming person who's going to succeed him. What's it mean within that? The people know that David is not going to see Absalom. So they know that David really hasn't forgiven him. He just brought him back to live at a different spot, maybe to keep an eye on him because he has too much freedom out where he is. The people are looking at this and they're not seeing any kind of forgiveness in this thing. But he is closer. So Joab's a little bit happier, but not totally happy. But he's hanging out. It's okay.
It doesn't lend itself particularly well to a peaceful transfer of power.
It does not.
It's hard to have a transfer without communication.
Why do you think Joab wanted Absalom to come back?
It would, if he became, the higher up Absalom was, the higher up he would be.
Because he helped him out, right? Sounds good.
The line in the musical Hamilton is proximity to power. You want to be close in order to have some teeth.
We are going to move on, but let me see. Before we move on, so I want to tell you just a little bit more that happens, because the next thing we're going to do is in chapter 15, verses 1 through 6. But there are some things that go on in between here that I don't want you to lose sight of in 14. And so the king, Absalom came back, and it's been 2 years that he is living in Jerusalem, and the king does not see him. And Absalom's starting to have enough of it. And he says to Joab, I want to talk to the king. And Joab doesn't, first of all, he doesn't talk right to Joab. He sends his servant and says, can you send Joab over here? And Joab's just like, I can't hear you. And he ignores him, and he keeps ignoring him. And Absalom gets upset. So he sets his field on fire.
That'll get his attention.
And then Joab comes and he's like, what are you doing? And he's like, you're here, right? That's what I wanted. Why didn't you come before? Then I wouldn't have had to set your field on fire. It's like, I want to talk to the king. And so Joab goes and says, come on, can you see him? Because, look what he's doing. And David goes to see him, and he kisses him, embraces him, and we are told that Absalom is really handsome. Beautiful hair, kingly appearance. He looks amazing. He has kids. He has 4 kids, 1 daughter. The daughter's name is Tamar, and he has 3 sons. And we don't know a whole lot more about what's up with them, but he is amazing. And people are looking at him and saying, oh, finally, David is recognizing him, and he is amazing. David's getting older. When it's time for a succession to happen, he looks great. He is the right person for the job. And we'll find out, maybe. So what's happening here is Absalom starts to do some political wielding. So we want to look at, in chapter 15, verses 1 through 6. Is there anybody who would be willing to read that? Okay, thanks.
After this, Absalom got himself a chariot and horses and 50 men to run ahead of him. Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the road into the gate, and when anyone brought a suit before the king for judgment, Absalom would pull out and say, "From what city are you?" When the person said, "Your servant is of such and such a tribe in Israel," Absalom would say, "See, your claims are good and right, but there is no one refuted by the king to hear you." Absalom said, "Moreover, if only I were judge in the land, then all who had a suit or cause might come to me, and I would give them justice." Whenever people came near to him, he would put out his hand and take hold of them and kiss them. Thus as Absalom did to every Israelite who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stilled the hearts of the people of Israel.
Can you see this? Can you picture it? It's just the ultimate politician. Kiss the babies, hug everybody. Oh, if only I were your president, if only I were your king, I would make things right. I would do this, I would do that. And he's greeting everybody who's coming into the city through this one gate, and just like, being very effervescent and charismatic. And and the people love him, right? Because he has contact with them. All right, so
He points out that the king has not deputized anybody, so the king obviously doesn't care about you, but I do.
exactly. Okay, and what's David do? Yep, it's not there. He does nothing. Nothing is the right answer. He knows this has gone on. I mean, he's not totally he's sitting in the castle, the palace. He's sitting in the palace. He's doing his thing. But he has people who are out in the streets. He has people who are letting him know what's happening. And he's just like, yeah, whatever. He's back. I love him. He's my son. He's the next in line. let's just, let's pretend this isn't going on. And what happens here? So
You must be counting his rubber duckies again or something.
indeed. So what happens is Absalom comes to him and says, hey, you know what? While I was away, I made a vow to God that I'm going to do this special thing. And I need to take some time and go to this place and, do my thing with God. And David says, cool, go. He takes with him a whole mess of people, important people. And while he's there, he says, you know what? I'm going to be king. And somebody comes running back to David and he's like, we got a problem. David does not stay in Jerusalem. He just decides, we got to get out of here. And he starts packing up and leaving. And that's where we're going to go with him. So that because Absalom is coming. He's coming into the city at one gate and David is going out at another. And they're just like filing out through. So let's take a look. I made a list of some things that are in Absalom's favor. When it's time for a rebellion or something that's going on, like somebody has to decide, the people are going to decide who they're going to follow. So David is old. He's probably 60 plus by now. No, I know, like when we, no.
That's not that old, Kathy.
At that time, let's make it old. Absalom is like, maybe in his 30s. And he's been out with the people. David was corrupt. The people know that. I mean, he could hide it, but he couldn't really hide it. They know what's going on. Absalom has the title of crown prince. He is gorgeous, hot. He has perceived power. When you read it, he had chariots. He had 50 chariots. And he had
50 runners in the
50
chariot.
runners. 50 runners in front of the chariots. And then when he would go out, so he has this whole like parade thing while he's out there. Well, like if there's a fire truck parade, everybody watches, right? And, wave to whoever it is. It's good. He's greeting everybody. The people love him. There is tribal resentment of David. The northern tribes are pretty tense with how they're reacting with David because they have to pay tribute and they have to take care of things. And everybody's not all cool with that. And they do it, you do what you have to do, but they're not all thrilled about this. So maybe if Absalom steps in, it'll be different. Absalom executed this coup incredibly well. He is outdoing his thing. He brought the most important people in the political, global thing in Jerusalem with him. And whether they agreed with him or not, they don't really have a big choice because they're out there with him. And it looks like they agree with him. And if they go up to him and they're like, no, I don't think so, they're dead. If they come back into Jerusalem with him and they say, we were just out for the party, they're still dead. So he did a very good job of making this all work the right way. And then there's the prophecy, right? Now, I don't know that everybody knew about the prophecy, but David. And he knew that this is not a good thing that's going to be happening here.
Cassie, is Absalom, is he religious? Is he believing in God? Or?
We don't know. We don't see any of that in here at this point. Oh, it's just not there.
Well, he said he's offering sacrifices, and it said that all those folks that went with him were innocent.
sacrifices to God.
That's why he told David.
That's what he tells David. Yeah. That's what he tells David. Yes.
Sacrifices to God.
Yes, but that's what he tells David so he can get out of the city. Now, what he does when he's out there, he doesn't do any of that. So I don't know what's in his heart. Know a little bit about what's in his heart. He is really angry. He's angry that David has done nothing about the rape of his sister. He's angry that Amnon did this and David didn't take care of it. He's angry that David didn't call him back sooner. He's angry that David didn't take care of it when he was living in the city. He's a really angry person. Plus, he wants to be king. Everybody wants to be king. So, but where his heart is, I can't tell you. David is exiled from Jerusalem, and we are looking at chapters 15 through 20. And if you see the red line, this is where it happens. He leaves Jerusalem. The one part in here that I don't focus on, it just hit me today while I was listening and interacting with Palm Sunday. David goes up the Mount of Olives and looks back on the city. And, that goes incredibly well with Holy Week and everything that's going on. So, Jesus is right at the same spot and, upset about the city as well. So David goes over, he hangs out right before the Jordan to get some answers. Then he crosses the Jordan, heads over. Eventually he comes back in. But so that's what we're looking at, just a little bit north of the Dead Sea and heading north from there to get some space. 2 Samuel 15, verses 14 through 30. Anybody want to read that?
It's 16.
No, 15.
14 to 30.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Then David said to all the officials who were in Jerusalem, "Get up, let us flee, so there will be no escape for us from Absalom." So everybody was soon overtaken. When the disaster down upon us, we packed the city at the end of the story. The king's officials said to the king, "Your servants are ready to do whatever the Lord the king decides." So the king left, followed by all his household and 10 concubines, who he left behind to at the house. The king left, followed by all the people, and stopped at the last house. All the officials passed by, and all the Cherethites, and all the Pelethites, and all 600 Hittites who had followed him from Gath passed on to the king. Then the king said to the Ittai, the Hittite, "Why are you also coming? Go back and say to the king, for you are a foreigner and also an exile from your home. You came over yesterday and shall I make you wonder about this while I go wherever I can? Go back and take him to the king's for a good thing. And may the Lord show steadfast love and faithfulness." But Ittai answered the king, "As the Lord lives and as my Lord the king lives, wherever my Lord the king may be, whether for death or for life, there also your servant will be." David said to Ittai, "Go then, march on." So Ittai the Hittite marched on with all his men and all the little ones with him. The whole country wept loud as those people passed by. The king crossed the Wadi Kidron, and all the people moved on toward the wilderness. Abiathar came up, and Zadok also, and all the Levites, carrying the ark of the covenant of God. They set down the ark of God until the people all passed out of the city. Then the king said to Zadok, "Carry the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, will bring you back, and let me see both it and the place where it's staying. But if he says, I take pleasure in you, here I am, then you will do what he did to him." The king also said to the priest Zadok, "Look, go back to the city and preach you and Abiathar of your two sons, Ahimaaz your son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. See, I will wait at the Lord at the forge with willingness until word comes to me with warning. So Zadok and Abiathar dragged the ark of the covenant and got back to Jerusalem and he waited. David went up, descended from the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head covered in water and barefoot. And all the people were with him, covered their heads and went up, weeping as he went.
Thanks. Wow. He's on his way out. And as the people are coming, he's standing by and he's letting them all pass in front of him. And the one guy goes, it's like, you don't have to go with me. You know, like, go back to your home, be safe. No, coming along. Okay. Sends the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem. If God wants me there, he'll get me back. He's in mourning. He has no shoes on. It's not that he left too quickly. And that's part of the mourning thing, at least from what I read. So we have quite a bit going on. Should he have stayed to fight?
Wonder why, because he was the king, he should have had an army that would have very easily overtaken his son's people.
And he did have some men who were with him, but maybe not as many. And remember, there's been a lot of schmoozing going on, right? Not so much with the army, but with the people.
That's why he asked the question, where did Absalom stand with God? Because you kind of wonder, well, I kind of wonder who's going to win here. You know, person that is with God, or but you said you didn't know what Absalom's status was. Well, maybe we'll find out in the next chapter.
Maybe. Okay, so, and he doesn't take the ark, and then, so there are some kind of like weird things that come in here. We go to chapter 16, and we're going to focus on 5 through 14. But before we do that, do you remember Ziba? He was, say that name for me, Susie. Mephibosheth.
Don't look at me.
Saul's grandson.
Yeah, it's weird.
Okay, so he, so we did it in Bible study before. I wasn't really embarrassing Susie to do that. I thought she could do it better than I.
He's mentioned again. Is that why you're?
Yeah, well, his
Here.
servant. His servant, it has the land. He's taking care of the land. Remember, David gave it to him? And he comes out and he greets him with a whole mess of stuff. He brings, I wrote everything down so that he brings in donkeys and wine and bread with raisins in it. And he's like, take this because you're going to need it. You left and you have nothing. And David's like, oh, thank you so much. Where's Mephibosheth? Like, he's back in the city waiting to be crowned king. Oh, okay then. But David is very grateful. He takes his supplies and he moves on. And now we have this like kind of humorous, not humorous thing that's happening here. So who feels like they would be willing to read 5 to 14 in chapter 16?
I can read it.
Thank you.
When King David came to the Hurim, a man of the family of the house of Saul came out, whose name was Shimei, son of Gera. He came out cursing. He threw stones at David and all the servants of King David. Now all the people and all the warriors were on his right and on his left. Shimei shouted while he cursed, out, out, murderer, scoundrel. The Lord has avenged on all of you the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. And the Lord has given the kingdom into the hand of your son Absalom. See, disaster has overtaken you, for you are a man of blood. Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said to the king, Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and take off his head. But the king said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? If he is cursing because the Lord has said to him, curse David, who then shall say, why have you done so? David said to Abishai and to all his servants, my own son seeks my life. How much more now may this Benjaminite let him alone and let him curse, for the Lord has bidden him. It may be that the Lord will look on my distress, and the Lord will repay me with good for this cursing of me today. So David and his men went on the road, while Shimei went along on the hillside opposite him and cursed as he went, throwing stones, flinging dust at him. The kings and all the people who were with him arrived weary at Jordan, and there he refreshed himself.
Can you see that happening today? A politician going down through and somebody throwing stones at him and the politician saying, no, don't worry about it. Okay.
But that's kind of the let's go Brandon banners are kind of in that spirit. And they're free speech. David saying whatever the Lord says, it's got to happen. So I think they're little shades of similarity, but you're right, it's very different. No Secret Service agent's going to let someone throw a stone at the president.
But they're trying to protect it, right? And so it's just a little bit humorous. Now, I wanted to take time and look at Psalm 3, but we have a lot more to do. So you might want to check that on your own and compare what is said in Psalm 3 with what's going on here. Maybe there's a reflection there. Let's look at 2 Samuel 18. Oh, and by the way, at the end of chapter 17, he gets word from Jerusalem, from the spies that he left there, move across the Jordan, get going. And he does, and they move on. So he does have some spies in there. He also has the 10 concubines. And we have, this is quite a bit, but I'll start reading. We'll just do popcorn. I'll read. I'll stop and say popcorn, somebody. And if you don't want to read 2 words and say popcorn and pass it on to somebody else. David mustered the men who were with him and appointed over them commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. Oh, he's getting the guys together because Absalom is coming to attack, right? David sent his troops out, a third under the command of Joab, a third under Joab's brother Abishai, son of Zeruiah, and a third under Ittai the Gittite. The king told the troops, I myself will surely march out with you. But the men said, you are not going out. If we are forced to flee, they won't care about us. Even if half of us die, they won't care. But you are worth 10,000 of us. It would be better now for you to give your support from the city. The king answered, I will do whatever seems best to you. So the king stood beside the gate while all the men marched out in units of hundreds and of thousands. And the king commanded Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake. That's important. Mm-hmm. And all the men heard the king giving orders concerning Absalom to each of his commanders. Now, just to stop a second, where did all these come from when it was just a small group that left Jerusalem? Well, he regrouped, and he could draw people from those cities where he went because he's the king. And he can just say like, okay, draft day, everybody's coming with me. So he had lots and lots of people who were fighting for it, whether they wanted to or not, irrelevant. They had to. The army marched into the field to fight Israel, and the battle took place in the forest of Ephraim. There, the army of Israel was defeated by David's men, and the casualties that day were great, 20,000 men. The battle spread out over the whole countryside, and the forest claimed more lives that day than the sword. Okay, here's a good one. So popcorn. Pastor, do you have a Bible around?
Yes.
Could you read?
Yep. Absalom happened to meet the servants of David. Absalom was riding on his mule, and the mule went under the thick branches of a great oak. His head caught fast in the oak, and he was left hanging between heaven and earth, while the mule that was under him went on. A man saw it and told Joab, "I saw Absalom hanging in an oak." Joab said to the man who told him, "What? You saw him? Why then did you not strike him there to the ground? I would have been glad to give you 10 pieces of silver and a belt." But the man said to Joab, "Even if I felt in my hand the weight of 1,000 pieces of silver, I would not raise my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing, the king commanded you and Abishai and Ittai, saying, 'For my sake, protect the young man Absalom.' On the other hand, if I had dealt treacherously against his life, and there is nothing hidden from the king, then you yourself would have stood aloof." Joab said, "I will not waste time like this with you." He took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them into the heart of Absalom while he was still alive in the oak. And 10 young men, Joab's armor bearers, surrounded Absalom and struck him and killed him. Then Joab sounded the trumpet, and the troops came back from pursuing Israel, for Joab restrained the troops. They took Absalom, threw him into a great pit in the forest, and raised over him a very great heap of stones. Meanwhile, all the Israelites fled to their homes. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and set up for himself a pillar that is in the king's valley, for he said, "I have no son to keep my name in remembrance." He called the pillar by his own name. It is called Absalom's monument to this day. Popcorn.
Sure.
Popcorn. Kurt, are you comfortable reading?
Then Amaz, son of Zadok, said, "Let me run and carry tidings to the king that the Lord has delivered him from the power of his enemies." Joab said to him, "You are not to carry tidings today. You may carry tidings another day, but today you shall not do so, because the king's son is dead." Then Joab said to a Cushite, "Go tell the king what you have seen." Cushite bowed before Joab and ran. Then Amasa, son of Jabak, said again to Joab, "Come what may, let me run after the Cushite." And Joab said, "Why will you run, my son, seeing that you have no reward for the tidings? Come what may." He said, "I will run." But he said to him, "Run." Then Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain, and now outran the Cushite. Oh, Lord, yes.
Thank you for taking that tough one, Kurt.
Now David was sitting between 2 gates, and the sentinel went up to the roof of the gate by the wall, and when he looked up, he saw him running alone. The sentinel shouted and told him. The king said, "If he's alone, there are tidings in his mouth." He kept coming and drew near. Then the sentinel saw another man running. The sentinel called to the gatekeeper and said, "See, another man running alone." The king said, "He is also bringing tidings." The sentinel said, I think the running of the first one is like the running of Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok. He said, he's a good man. It comes with good tidings. And Ahimaaz cried out to the king, all is well. He prostrated himself before the king with his face to the ground. He said, blessed be the Lord your God who has delivered the men who raised their hand against my Lord the king. King said, is it well with the young man Absalom? Ahimaaz answered, when your Joab, your servant, I saw a great tumult, but I did not know what it was. King said, turn aside and stand here. So we turned aside and stood still. Then the Cushite came, and the Cushite said, good tidings for my lord the king. The Lord has vindicated you this day, delivering you from the power of all who rose up against you. The king said to the Cushite, is it well with the young man Absalom? The Cushite answered, may the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise up to you do harm, but be like that young man. The king was deeply moved. They went up to the chamber of the king and wept. And as he went, he said, oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom. Would I have died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son?
And Jordan, pick somebody just for 1 through 8.
I'll keep reading.
Okay, great.
I was told Joab, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom. Oh, it was told to Joab, the king's weeping and mourning for Absalom. So the victory that day was turned into mourning for all the troops. For the troops heard that day, the king was grieving for his son. The troops stole into the city that day as soldiers steal in who are ashamed when they flee back. The king covered his face and the king cried with a loud voice, oh, my son Absalom, oh, Absalom, my son, my son. Then Joab came into the house of the king and said, today you have covered with shame the faces of all your officers who have saved your life and the lives of your sons and your daughters and the lives of your wives and your concubines. For love of those who hate you and for hatred of those who love you. You have made it clear today that commanders and officers are nothing to you. For I perceive that if Absalom were alive and all of us were dead today, then you be pleased. Go out at once and speak kindly to your servants, for I swear by the Lord, if you not go out, not a man will stay with you this night. And this will be worse for you than any disaster that's come upon you from your youth until now. And the king got up and took a seat at the gate. The troops were all told, see, the king is sitting in the gate. And all the troops came before the king.
Nice. Whoa. What do you think?
I don't know. I get the idea that he's kind of a knucklehead. Who's holding.
How so?
Well, instead of standing up and fighting for the city and fighting against the son Absalom, or just putting him in his place, he flees the city. And then the young man would look and take his life, and when he dies, he mourns for him, just like he did for Saul. Saul tried to kill him. And when Saul was killed, he wept for Saul.
Do you think Joab's right to give him a verbal slap?
Yes.
Everybody agree with that? I see everybody shaking their head. But he is very upfront, right? Look, you might be mourning your son, but all of these people saved your life. You better go out and thank them. If you don't, you're not going to have anybody with you later on. Now Joab's not going to have any place either. So maybe it's a little self-serving in there. Or maybe he is. You know, there's nobody around. There's more of his sons, but they're not hanging out right now. So maybe Joab will step in and be like king for a little bit until somebody else takes over. But yeah, definitely some visuals that are in here. Why do you think Joab killed Absalom?
Maybe he thought he'd take his place.
Maybe. I don't have an answer here. I'm just like throwing it out. I was thinking too, that he knew the king couldn't do it. So maybe he's doing David a favor. Even though everybody was told, don't do that. And what's he going to do with him if he brings it down? Okay.
Yeah.
A little bit more yet. So the battle's over. He can go home, right, as a victor. But he's not really a victor because we've got these loose ends to wrap up. Just looking at 5 verses here in 2 Samuel. I wrote that wrong there. Well, I think it's the same thing. Hang on. Give me a second. I'm sorry. I screwed that up. That's what I was saying. Okay. We want to look at chapter 20, and it's just 16 through 20. And just to like get you going with what's happening. Absalom's buried, we know that. We know about David mourning. There's victory, but not victory because he's mourning. And and then David's talking to some of the other people, and he tells Amasa, who is one of the commanders under Absalom, he's like, you are a good fighter. We need to draw these armies together. You're going to be the commander, not Joab. Oh, this is not good. Maybe in David's mind, he sees this as being a good thing. Yeah, Joab doesn't really see it that way. And David is asked. He needed somebody to ask him to come back and be king. And he needed to do some political movement to do this. Nobody was jumping up and down and saying, "Hey, David, you're back. Come on, come on, come on." The Benjamites call him back. But the other tribes are just kind of like, oh, we don't know, maybe. They go past the guy who was throwing rocks. Remember him? And he's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. Just fell out of my hands. And they're just like, he's just like, kill him now. No, leave him go. This is all good. They get to the Jordan and they hang out for a while. Ziba is there. And and then Mephibosheth is there. And David's like, well, why didn't you come with us? And he said, well, because Ziba said that I should stay here. And David can't figure it out. And he just doesn't want to deal with it. And he's like, you know what? Ziba gets half of what you have. You get half of what you have. I need to move out of this whole thing. So he does make a decision there, for better or worse. He's also not going to hurt Mephibosheth, right? Because of the plan that he had made with Jonathan. Thank you. Okay, and so he splits the land, and Mephibosheth says, you know what, just let him have it. I don't want it anyway. Which sounds like this is a good thing. But yeah, again, we don't see their hearts. We see this little tiny, tiny blink into their lives. And then we have a problem in chapter 20. David goes back into the city, but Sheba rebels against David. Everybody else is like, yeah, David's back. Whether they agree with it or not, they start paying homage to David. But this one guy, he's like, no, I'm not. And he takes off and starts going up through. And then we have Joab, who's not happy about Amasa being in his place. What do you think Joab's going to do?
That's a murder.
Yeah, because, he's pretty good at that. When he doesn't like what somebody's doing, knife into the intestines. Apparently he could, right? They didn't fall out. And yes, so he's going to take care of that. And let's see where we go here. So we're in chapter 20, verses 16 through 20. And far be it from me, Joab replied, far be it from me to swallow up or destroy Ephraim.
Do you have chapter 20, verse 16?
Chapter 20, verse 16. Oh, yes. Why am I?
Then we're skipping the Joab part. Did you want the Joab and Amasa?
Okay, so let me go back to 11.
Okay.
One of Joab's men stood beside Amasa. Whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab. Amasa lay wallowing in blood at the side of the road. So he killed him. He's laying there, and they're like, we got to go get Sheba. And anybody who wants to stay here with the guy that I just spilled his guts all over the road, stay here. But we're headed off that way. And they went, and they took care of things. And they came to Abel Beth Makkah, and they're getting ready to attack the city. And this woman came out, this wise woman. This is verse 16. A wise woman called from the city, listen, tell Joab to come here so I can speak to him. He went toward her and said, are you Joab? I am. Listen to what your servant has to say. I'm listening. She continued, long ago, they used to say, get your answer at Abel, and that settled it. We are peaceful and faithful in Israel. You are trying to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why do you want to swallow up the Lord's inheritance? Far be it from me, Joab replied. Far be it from me to swallow up or destroy. That is not the case. A man named Sheba, son of Bichri, from the hill country of Ephraim, has lifted up his hand against the king, against David. Hand over this man, and I'll withdraw from the city. She said to Joab, his head will be thrown to you from the wall. Then the woman went with all the people with her wise advice, and they cut off the head of Sheba, son of Bichri, and threw it to Joab. He sounded the trumpet, and the men dispersed from the city, each returning to his home, and Joab went back to the king. Yeah. So we got rid of the guy in a relatively peaceful way, except for the guy. And for Amasa, who, like everything gets taken care of one way or the other. So Joab is kind of tying up loose ends here. And David's back in Jerusalem, hanging out. It appears that, as good as it gets, we're there. Is Joab really David's friend?
He's his fixer.
What did she say? His fixer?
Like a consigliere. So like in the Godfather series, the consigliere, right?
Yeah.
The right-hand person doing all the dirty work.
Well, I'm thinking of like Harry Washington scandal or whatever. Only he's a little more violent than she.
Takeaways. What hit you today? Anything?
Well, something that hit me is that you reap what you sow, or neglect to sow. David sat back and didn't do much, and it enabled all of this mess with Absalom and Amnon, and it just enabled it all. And it seemed to me, he goes to God about so many things, but He didn't go to God about, this is a mess with my family. What should I do, Lord? And so you reap what you sow or you don't sow or whatever. So that would be perfect.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anything you're hearing here for the first time?
I don't ever remember studying David to this degree. But thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Like I said, good story. David is an incredible person, but we're not seeing like his happy times right now. And, we don't see him going back. We saw him asking twice before, are you sure you want me to go get these people? And we don't see that in here. Maybe it's not written, but maybe it's not happening. So, yeah. So
I think to your point, Kathy, because when David was receiving the curses and the stones and the dirt, he was just saying, oh, that's God's plan. So it's almost like he has a fatalism kind of thing. Like he used to go to God and it used to be a dynamic conversation. And now it seems like he's just feeling victimized and he's on the receiving end, and whatever God's going to dish out, he's just going to roll with it, suck it up.
And maybe that's the thing with the kids as well. Like you said, there's going to be a sword all through that's going to destroy my family. So you're doing it. What can I do about this? Which raises the question, should we be active, or should we just sit back and say, okay, God, whatever, do what you want?
I think that's one of the huge theological debates, right? You have people that say God has everything planned out to the moment in our lives, and we're just following that plan. So when something awful happens, well, God had a reason or God had a plan. And as you know, that is not a theology I prescribe to. But there's lots of folks that are believing that, everything is planned out and etched in stone.
If God wants me to get COVID, I'll get COVID.
I wasn't going to go there.
All right. Next, in 2 weeks. Next week we are not meeting. The following week we are finishing everything up. We're going to read the end of 2 Samuel, which is 21 and 22, 23, 24, and then 1 Kings, chapters 1 and 2. And that's where we're going to stop. If we have time, there's 2 Psalms that I would like to look at as well. If we get there, we get there. If we don't, we don't. Psalm 3 is the one that I would recommend that if you have a chance, go back and read that one and compare that with what's going on. Anything else? And that's great. Father, when we see David's decline from his greatness as a man of God, we're sad. How much it must have pained your heart. We pray with David, keep your servant also from willful sins. May they not rule over me. Then I will be blameless, innocent of great transgression. Where we have fallen, have mercy on us and our children. Renew your Holy Spirit's freedom within our spirits. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
May the Lord watch
between me and thee
while we're absent one from another. Amen. Great. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.